Now I have the real pleasure of welcoming two very, very good friends of us. They are both Mexican architects graduated from the Harvard Grad School of Design. Adriana Chavez holds an MR2 and an MDes in Urbanism, Landscape, and Ecology from the GSD, had also led the 100 Resilient Cities initiative here in Chile, and today is member of the Regional Office for the Inter-American Development Bank. Victor Rico, he also holds a master from the GSD in urban design and had collaborated with the Public Space Authority here. Both now lead the effort of an emergent practice which is called ARU, Agencia de Residencia Urbana. Please join me in welcoming Adriana and Victor.
All right, well, thank you very much for the invitation to Charles and the Office for Organization, Dr. Klaas, and Museo Tamayo, as well as the rest of the organizers. Sorry, is that better? Yes. All right, thank you. All right, so thanks for the invitation. And this is not ours? Should we
change?
Should we switch?
Sorry, I'm very short for this stage.
Okay. All right, thank you. So first of all, we want to start with using a quote by Vittorio Gregotti that says that the origin of architecture is not the primitive hut, but the marking of the ground to establish a cosmic order around the surrounding chaos of nature. Today we're here to reflect on how landscape as the design discipline can inform strategies for sustainable urban transformation, whether transport, housing, public space, or other infrastructures. First of all, can we see a quick show of hands of who here has worked as designers for or within government anywhere in the world? All right, so not that much. But the reason we ask that is because we believe that it is urgent that designers begin to respond to extreme scales that are witnessing in the built environment. If we are unable to respond to the current challenges of urbanization in a way that can create a new notion of quality at the different scales, architects will stop being useful for society and will run the risk of isolation in an elite's world. This, though, sometimes requires the denial of authorship. There are issues and even scales that we think designers working on transformative urban projects need to become more invested in. And this is something that was already mentioned by Pedro, the design of a process. For instance, working inside institutions has taught us that successful projects and processes entail something extremely intricate, the connectedness between advocates, technicians, communities, policymakers, politicians, and designers.
So large-scale projects cannot escape the socio-political dimension. In this sense, as opposed to the narrow plot approach, we believe that the discipline of landscape offers a new lens that allows us to visualize different scales in order to catalyze multiple problem-solving alternatives. It also provides new frameworks to better approach and integrate a multiplicity of stakeholders. Within the urban field, there are too many pressures and complex problems, where no single discipline is able to encompass them all in order to produce a result. Just as designers, we have to be able to inform and influence plans, outcomes, and decision-making. That means we need to be at the decision-making table. Thus, at ARU, we have become kind of activist designers. We've spent the past 3 years working towards the... Oh, sorry. Now you see me. Now it's very short. We have become some of activist designers. We've spent the past 3 years working towards the fulfillment of multiple public policy objectives. by expanding institutional capacities and influencing the public agenda in terms of resilience, water management to public space, not only within the government, but also from the private and development sector. This experience have revealed that processes and territorial advocacy, and not just isolated projects, are fundamental for longer-term visions and more integrated urban development in Mexico and in Latin America.
So we're going to take a look at those issues we've pointed out as critical in Mexico City. First of all, this time-lapse you're probably going to see several times during these lectures. First, there's the city's confrontation with its geography and its evolution in relationship to water. This is a 500-year time-lapse on a 60 by 60 square kilometer. It just shows the immense territorial transformation that the city has suffered throughout 500 years. And what used to be a lake is today a dry surface occupied by 22 million inhabitants. So we actually used these very images and showed them to authorities in order to create a sense of urgency in order to begin to contend with this phenomenon.
Within the expanded urbanization process, we found these two main factors that influence the urban and territorial development, specifically for any landscape project in the city. First, we see on the left the socio-spatial inequality that Mexico City presents. You see the darker magenta areas, which are the areas with more marginalization. And on the right, we see the vast and extensive area that is subject to floods in Mexico City. This speculative image created with GIS information serves us to visualize what could be done next. We will try to imagine the overlap of the ancient city and the lake and the current extent of the city, as well as a series of large-scale footprints and infrastructures that could be repurposed to better manage water in Mexico City.
Now we'll focus on some projects and initiatives where Adriana and myself have participated. First, we've come to acknowledge that infrastructures seem to have that in-betweenness between that object and networks that helps catalyze transformations at the territorial scale. First, we worked on two large planning projects, the Resilience Strategy for Mexico City, and then a report titled Towards a Water-Sensitive Mexico City, Public Space as Rain Management Strategy, and a first build project, La Viga Linear Park. These projects, of course, insert themselves in larger processes, both participatory and interdisciplinary, and in each case, we contributed to something quite extraordinary, which is the broadening of institutional capacities and frontiers to articulate research, design, public policy, and build projects.
So first we'll start with the resilience strategy. It's this document that was published last September, which explores the shocks and stresses that the city faces vis-a-vis the challenge for a sustainable future. The project was part of an initiative pioneered by the Rockefeller Foundation called 100 Resilient Cities, which is a network of cities that work together on finding innovative solutions for tackling urbanization problems such as climate change, water scarcity, or social inequality. We contributed to this project first as creating the application on behalf of Mexico City's government, and thereafter being part of the team that created the strategy within the Resilience Office, collaborating with the Mexico City Chief Resilient Officer, Arnoldo Matus. The strategy was a participatory process with the multiple agencies and stakeholders in the city that identify strategic projects in the following pillars that you see here in this diagram, which is regional coordination, water resilience, urban and territorial planning, mobility and innovations. All of them are key aspects for the future of Mexico City, and this document is a roadmap with the strategic interventions for improving critical aspects and prepare the city for future challenges. Within the Resilience Office and the Resilience Strategy, one of the key aspects was promoting water resilience as a new paradigm for Mexico City. It helped to construct a long-term agenda on some of the most pressuring aspects, such as climate change.
So building up on the water resilience paradigm shift, we'll quickly present the report Towards a Water-Sensitive Mexico City. It was the result of a nurtured and successful collaboration between a diversity of stakeholders, ranging from diplomats to academics and technicians to institutional authorities, including the Resilience Office. This effort was led by the Public Space Authority of Mexico City, while I was the Director of Special Projects. And it was financed by CAF, Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina, and the Dutch Embassy. In it, the Urbanisten, a Dutch urban design firm, and Deltares, a renowned Dutch hydrology and geology research institute, developed, along with AEP designers, a comprehensive analysis of Mexico City's hydrological systems and contributed to the development of a catalog of water management design solutions applicable to a range of public spaces in relation to different geographic locations, soil types, and rain intensity variables. It was a design-driven initiative that takes into account the geographies and history of the city in order to deliver a territorial strategy for rainwater management through public spaces. This study proposes that the city should become more like a sponge than a system of funnels in order to help restore the hydrological balance. It's based on the principles that we can see on this image of store, retain, delay, reuse, and drain only when necessary. So up in the mountainous area, or the conservation area that we just saw in the previous presentation, the strategy aims at storing water to infiltrate and recharge the aquifers. Along the slopes, rainwater should be delayed to prevent runoff water from reaching the lower parts too fast and collapsing the drainage infrastructure, which causes floods. In the lower areas, water should be retained and reused. And for instance, in the eastern part of the basin, reusing water for irrigation and for greening the city is key to diminish evapotranspiration and to mitigate higher temperatures.
This is a conceptual map that showcases the main goals for each of the 6 identified geographical zones in the city. We propose design solutions and physical interventions for each zone on this map that you can see. These are the 6 areas. These are the other 6 areas. You can see the slopes, the low area in the basin, and the mountainous volcanic areas, which is a conservation area. The zones were identified according to a territorial analysis based on topography, geology, precipitation, and so on. This is important because depending on the site, type of soil, and the specificities of the areas, the different strategies will apply. Now you can see the different geology and types of soil that Mexico City has. I think this connects very well with what Pedro Camarena mentioned on the volcanic rocks in the south, but we try to propose a strategy that can help to merge the strategies and the scales of intervention depending on where in the city you are located. So the strategies are organized on a catalog according to the scale of intervention from extra large to small. You can see on the top. These strategies range from generic large-scale seasonal water storage facilities to a series of more site-specific interventions such as rain gardens or water plazas. For each zone, different typological interventions are inserted into the dense urban fabric. For example, oversized streets are linear parks, such as the following pilot project called La Viga Linear Park.
So we're going to quickly present this La Viga Linear Park, which is about half a kilometer in length and 16,000 square meters in size. The project was developed last year at the Public Space Authority, and I'm happy to see lots of people here that were involved in this project. So as mentioned in the beginning, the city has faced an asymmetrical development and socio-spatial exclusion. The most transformative projects and investments have taken place in recent years in the city have happened on the west, inside what we call the boot, or the black area that you see in this map. On the one hand, freshwater sources have typically been found on the west, and the wealthier populations developed these lands in order to secure water. On the other hand, as the lakes retreated to the east and to the north, the swampy lands left behind were seen as unsuitable for production and development. This more or less explains this east-west disparity. At AEP, we were determined to begin to reverse this pattern and decided to invest in La Viga, which is right outside that's the black spot, and it's the pink dot. This avenue used to be a water canal that connected Xochimilco and downtown, and a complex system of markets was established along the canal to distribute goods, and it was also operated from the 17th century up until 20th century. We're just going to quickly show the project. This is how it looked before. This is how we found it. And it is very important here to mention, again, process.
So finally, because we know we have limited time, so with these proposals, we would like to reflect that cities might agree on what to do, but perhaps the most important takeaway is how we do it. Transformative projects are the result of a collective effort that requires the links between advocates, designers, policymakers, communities, and politicians. So changing a city's built realm is still the big challenge. Politics, special interests always get in the way. So we need game changers that are not only technically skillful, but as well as good managers that understand how to shape the process. We need more designer advocates that want to understand how to best influence and support this process, or when needed, how to drive it. Perhaps as designers, as advocates, require a more prominent role to design that how, as a process with an active and loud support role, backing up policymakers that are attempting change. Thank you.